Lisa thought her life was perfect. At 32, she had everything a woman could want. A beautiful house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. A husband who drove an expensive car and wore fancy suits to work every day. Friends who envied her lifestyle. Everyone always told her how lucky she was. She met Robert in college when they were both 22. He was studying business and she was training to be a teacher. Robert had big dreams. He wanted to make lots of money and live in a big house. Lisa loved his ambition. She believed in him completely. After they got married, Robert started his own company. Those early years were tough. He worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Lisa supported him in every way she could. She gave up her dream of teaching to help him build his business. She answered his phone calls, organized his files, and made sure he ate proper meals. When other women complained about their husbands, Lisa felt proud. Her husband was different. He was going places. He would give her the life she deserved. All those late nights and missed dinners would be worth it someday. Slowly, Robert's business grew. They moved from their tiny apartment to a nice house, then to an even bigger house in the best part of town. Lisa decorated every room perfectly. She hosted dinner parties for Robert's business friends. She smiled and played the perfect wife role, but something was missing. Lisa wanted children. She dreamed of a house filled with laughter and tiny footsteps. Every time she brought up the topic, Robert said they should wait. First, he needed to grow his business more. Then he needed to save more money. There was always a reason to wait. Lisa told herself to be patient. Robert was working so hard for their future. Once his business was really successful, they would start their family. She spent her days volunteering at the local animal shelter and taking cooking classes. Anything to fill the empty hours while Robert was at work. Their friends thought they had the perfect marriage. Robert bought Lisa expensive jewelry and designer clothes. They went on fancy vacations to places like Paris and Hawaii. Lisa posted beautiful photos on social media. Everyone commented about how perfect their life looked, but behind closed doors, things were different. Robert came home later and later each night. When he was home, he was always on his phone or laptop. He said he was building their future, so Lisa didn't complain. She made his favorite dinners and waited for him to come home, even if it was past midnight. Lisa started to feel lonely in her own marriage. She tried to talk to Robert about it, but he always had an excuse. He was stressed about work. He had important meetings. He needed to focus on his business right now. Lisa believed him because she wanted to believe him. Then came that Thursday evening in October. Lisa had made Robert's favorite meal, grilled chicken with vegetables. She set the table with their best dishes and lit candles. She wanted to create a romantic evening. Maybe they could finally talk about having children. Robert came home at 8 o'clock, which was early for him. But instead of being happy about the dinner, he looked nervous. He barely touched his food. Lisa asked him what was wrong, but he said nothing. He just stared at his plate. After dinner, Robert went to his office and closed the door. Lisa could hear him making phone calls, but she couldn't understand what he was saying. She cleaned the kitchen and waited for him to come out. Around 10 o'clock, he finally opened the door. Robert walked into the living room carrying a folder. His hands were shaking slightly. Lisa had never seen him look so uncomfortable. She asked him again what was wrong. This time, he sat down across from her and opened the folder. Inside were legal papers. Divorce papers with both their names on them. Lisa stared at the documents, not understanding what she was seeing. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe Robert was helping a friend with their divorce, but then Robert started talking. His voice was quiet and flat, like he was reading from a script. He told Lisa that he wanted a divorce. He said he had been unhappy for a long time. He said they had grown apart and wanted different things. Lisa felt like the room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. Just that morning, Robert had kissed her goodbye and said he loved her. They had been married for 8 years. They had built a life together. How could he want to throw it all away? She asked him if they could try marriage counseling. Maybe they could work things out. Robert shook his head. He said his mind was made up. He had already talked to a lawyer. He had already found an apartment. He would move out this weekend. Lisa begged him to explain what had changed. What had she done wrong? Robert looked uncomfortable. He said it wasn't her fault. They had just, grown apart. These things happen. People change. But Lisa knew there was more to the story. Robert was hiding something. She could see it in his eyes. After 8 years of marriage, she knew when he was lying. She kept asking questions until finally the truth came out. Robert had been seeing someone else, another woman. Her name was Kelly, and she worked as his assistant. They had been together for almost a year. Kelly was 24 years old, 8 years younger than Lisa. Robert said Kelly made him feel young and excited again. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Her husband, the man she had supported and believed in for 10 years, had been lying to her for a year. While she was at home making his dinners and planning their future, he was with another woman. Lisa asked him how long he had been planning to leave her. Robert admitted he had been thinking about divorce for months. He and Kelly had been making plans together. They were going to move in together as soon as the divorce was final. Robert stood up and said he was sorry, but this was for the best. He said Lisa deserved to be with someone who could make her happy. He couldn't be that person anymore. He had found someone who understood him better. Lisa sat on the couch in shock as Robert went upstairs to pack his clothes. She could hear him moving around their bedroom, taking his things. The life she thought was so perfect was falling apart in one evening. When Robert came downstairs with his suitcases, Lisa made one last attempt to save their marriage. She told him they could work through this. She forgave him for the affair. They could start over and try to rebuild their relationship. Robert looked at her with pity in his eyes. He said it was too late. He had already moved on emotionally. He and Kelly were in love. They had plans for the future. Plans that didn't include Lisa. As Robert walked out the door, Lisa realized that her perfect life had been an illusion. While she was playing the role of the perfect wife, her husband was planning his escape. The future she had dreamed of was never going to happen. She was 32 years old, and her life was starting over whether she wanted it to or not. The divorce papers were signed on a cold February morning. Lisa sat in the lawyer's office, signing away 8 years of her life with a black pen. Robert sat across the table, not looking at her. His lawyer did most of the talking while Robert stared out the window. Lisa discovered that the man she thought she knew had been planning this divorce for a long time. Robert had moved money around, hiding assets from her. The beautiful house they lived in was mostly in his name. The savings account she thought had $50,000 actually had less than $5,000. Robert's lawyer explained that since Lisa hadn't worked in years, she would get some money each month for a while, but it wasn't much. Certainly not enough to keep living the lifestyle she was used to. Lisa's own lawyer, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, warned her that she needed to find work quickly. When everything was signed, Robert finally looked at her. For a moment, Lisa thought she saw regret in his eyes. But then he stood up, straightened his expensive tie, and walked out of the room without saying goodbye. Lisa sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, crying. She had nowhere to go. Robert was keeping the house, and she had to move out by the end of the month. She had no job, very little money, and no idea how to start over. The first month after the divorce was the hardest time of Lisa's life. She moved into a small apartment across town. The rent took most of her monthly payment from Robert. She had to sell her jewelry and designer clothes just to buy groceries. Lisa tried to find work, but it was harder than she expected. She hadn't worked in 8 years. Her teaching degree was old, and she would need to take classes to get her license back. Other jobs wanted experience she didn't have or skills she had never learned. Day after day, Lisa went to job interviews and got rejected. Some employers asked about the gap in her work history. When she explained that she had been supporting her husband's business, they looked at her like she had wasted 8 years of her life. The worst part was how her friends treated her. The couples she and Robert used to have dinner with suddenly stopped calling. When Lisa ran into them at the grocery store, they acted uncomfortable and awkward. Some of them had already started inviting Robert and Kelly to their parties. Lisa's sister called from California to check on her. When Lisa broke down crying on the phone, her sister begged her to move to California and stay with her family. But Lisa felt too ashamed. She had spent years bragging about her perfect life and successful husband. Now she would have to admit that it was all a lie. One evening, Lisa was eating a can of soup for dinner when she saw Robert and Kelly on television. They were at some business event, looking happy and successful. Kelly was wearing a diamond necklace that Lisa recognized. It was the necklace Robert had bought for their 5th wedding anniversary. That night, Lisa hit rock bottom. She sat on the floor of her tiny apartment and cried until she had no tears left. She felt like a complete failure. At 32, she had no career, no money, no husband, and no children. All her dreams had disappeared. But sometimes, when you hit rock bottom, that's when you finally start to see clearly. Lisa realized that. She had spent 8 years living someone else's dream instead of her own. She had supported Robert's goals while ignoring her own desires. She had tried so hard to be the perfect wife that she had forgotten who she really was. Lisa remembered her grandmother, who had died when Lisa was 15. Grandma Rose had been the strongest woman Lisa ever knew. She had raised 5 children by herself after her husband died young. Grandma Rose used to tell Lisa stories about living in Montana when she was young. Sometimes, Grandma Rose used to say, you have to go to the mountains to remember who you really are. Wide open spaces help you think clearly about what really matters in life. Lisa had always thought those stories were just old-fashioned tales. But now, sitting alone in her apartment, she remembered the way her grandmother's eyes lit up when she talked about Montana. Maybe Grandma Rose had been trying to tell her something important. Lisa went to her computer and looked up bus tickets to Montana. She had never been there, but something about the idea called to her, a place where nobody knew her story. A place where she could start completely over. She found a small town called Cedar Ridge. It looked like the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. The kind of place where people still helped their neighbors and said hello to strangers on the street. It was the complete opposite of the city life she had been living. The bus ticket cost almost all the money Lisa had left. But she didn't care. She was tired of being scared and ashamed. She was tired of living in a place where everyone reminded her of her failures. She needed to go somewhere new and figure out who she really was. Lisa packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases. She left her fancy furniture and expensive dishes behind. None of that stuff mattered anymore. She realized that all those material things had been Robert's dream, not hers. On her last morning in the apartment, Lisa stood at the window looking at the city skyline. She thought about the woman who had lived here for the past few months. That woman had been broken and scared. But the woman getting on the bus to Montana was different. She was still hurt and confused, but she was also determined to build a new life. Lisa's phone rang as she was waiting for the taxi to take her to the bus station. It was Robert. He sounded awkward and uncomfortable. He asked if she was really moving to Montana. Someone had told him she was leaving town. For a moment, Lisa thought about telling him how much he had hurt her. She wanted to ask him if Kelly was worth destroying their marriage. But then she realized that she didn't need answers from Robert anymore. His opinion didn't matter to her life now. I'm going to be fine, Lisa told him. Better than fine, actually. Robert seemed surprised by how calm she sounded. He mumbled something about wishing her good luck and hung up quickly. When the taxi arrived, Lisa took one last look at the apartment where she had cried so many tears. Then she picked up her suitcases and walked out the door. She was leaving. Behind everything that had defined her for the past 8 years, she had no idea what was waiting for her in Montana, but she knew it had to be better than staying in a place that only reminded her of her broken dreams. The bus ride to Montana took 18 hours. Lisa stared out the window as the landscape changed from city buildings to farmland to mountains. With every mile, she felt a little bit stronger. She was doing something brave and scary, but it felt right. As the bus pulled into Cedar Ridge, Lisa saw a small town that looked like something from a movie. Main Street had old-fashioned storefronts and pickup trucks parked along the sidewalk. Mountains rose up in the distance. covered with trees and snow. Lisa stepped off the bus with her 2 suitcases and breathed the clean mountain air. She had no job, no place to live, and knew nobody in this town. But for the first time in months, she felt hopeful. This was her chance to start over and build a life that was truly her own. Lisa stood on the sidewalk of Cedar Ridge with her 2 suitcases, watching the bus disappear down the highway. The town was smaller than it had looked in the photos online. Main Street stretched for maybe 6 blocks with a few shops, a bank, and what looked like a diner with a bright red sign that said, Millie's. The March air was crisp and clean, so different from the smoggy city she had left behind. Mountains surrounded the town on all sides, making her feel like she was in a protective bowl. Everything was quiet except for the sound of wind in the trees and a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Lisa picked up her suitcases and walked toward the diner. She needed coffee and a plan. The suitcases felt heavier with each step, and she realized how out of shape she had become from months of sitting around feeling sorry for herself. When she pushed open the door to Millie's diner, a bell jingled. Overhead, the smell of bacon and coffee hit her immediately, making her stomach growl. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, too nervous about the bus ride to keep food down. The diner looked like something from the 1950s, red vinyl booths lined the windows and a long counter ran along one wall. A jukebox sat in the corner, playing an old country song. Everything was clean but worn, like it had been loved and used by thousands of people over the years. An older woman with gray hair and a kind face looked up from behind the counter. She was probably in her 60s, wearing a white apron over a blue dress. When she saw Lisa standing in the doorway with her suitcases, her expression changed to concern. Honey, you look like you've had a long trip, the woman said, walking over to Lisa. I'm Millie Thompson. This is my place. Why don't you sit down and let me get you some coffee? Lisa felt tears threatening to start again. It had been so long since anyone had shown her simple kindness without wanting something in return. Thank you, she managed to say. I'm Lisa. Millie led her to a booth by the window and brought her a steaming cup of coffee. The warmth of the mug felt good in Lisa's cold hands. She took a sip and realized it was the best coffee she had ever tasted. You're not from around here, Millie said, sitting down across from her. It wasn't a question. Lisa shook her head. I just got off the bus from Chicago. I'm looking for a fresh start, I guess. Millie nodded like she understood completely. Cedar Ridge is a good place for fresh starts. We don't ask too many questions about where people come from. We're more interested in who they are now. Lisa felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She had been so worried that people would judge her for running away from her problems. But Millie made it sound like starting over was perfectly normal. Are you looking for work? Millie asked. Lisa nodded. I need a job and a place to stay. I don't have much money left. Millie studied Lisa's face for a moment. Can you wait tables? I've never done it before, but I'm willing to learn, Lisa said quickly. Good enough for me, Millie smiled. I've been looking for help for months. My last waitress moved to Denver to be closer to her grandkids. The job doesn't pay much, but it includes tips and meals. And there's a small apartment upstairs that's been empty for a while. If you want it, you can work off the rent. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had been in town for less than an hour, and already someone was offering her a job and a place to live. Are you serious? Dead serious, Millie said. You seem like a nice girl who's going through a rough time. We've all been there. Sometimes we just need someone to give us a chance. Lisa felt tears of relief rolling down her cheeks. Thank you so much. I promise I'll work hard. I can tell you will, Millie said, patting Lisa's hand. Now, let me show you the apartment, and then we'll get you started. The apartment above? The diner was tiny but clean. It had one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room with a big window that looked out at the mountains. The furniture was old, but comfortable. After months in her depressing city apartment, this felt like a palace. The last girl left some clothes up here that might fit you, Millie said, opening a closet. You'll need comfortable shoes and clothes you can move around in. Lisa found some jeans and a simple blouse that fit well enough. She changed clothes and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Without her expensive makeup and designer clothes, she looked younger and more natural. She liked what she saw. Downstairs, Millie showed her how to work the coffee machine and take orders. The system was simple and old-fashioned. Everything was written down by hand, no computers or complicated technology. The most important thing, Millie explained, is to treat every customer like they're your favorite aunt or uncle. People come here for more than just food. They come for friendship and conversation. Lisa's first day was harder than she expected. Her feet hurt from standing and she spilled coffee on herself twice, but the customers were patient and kind. When she made mistakes, they just smiled and said it was no problem. Around mid-morning, a man came in and sat at the counter. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-30s, with brown hair that looked like he had just taken off a cowboy hat. His clothes were clean but clearly work clothes, jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt. "Morning, Millie," he said with a voice that had a slight drawl. "The usual, please." "Coming right up, Jake," Millie replied. She turned to Lisa. "This is Jake Harrison. He's one of our regulars. Jake, this is Lisa. She's my new waitress." Jake touched the brim of an imaginary hat and nodded at Lisa. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." Lisa poured his coffee, trying not to spill it. Jake ordered biscuits and gravy, which Millie prepared while humming along with the jukebox. Lisa brought Jake his food and noticed that he said thank you like he really meant it. While Jake ate, Lisa cleaned tables and learned the routine of the diner. She noticed that Jake read a paperback book while he ate, something about ranching techniques. When he finished his meal, he left a $5 tip on a $10 bill. "That's Jake for you," Millie said as he left. "Works harder than anyone I know and never complains about anything. He runs cattle on the Morrison Ranch about 10 miles out of town." Over the next few days, Lisa fell into a rhythm. She worked the morning shift from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. The work was physically demanding, but she liked staying busy. It kept her mind off her problems. Jake came in every morning at exactly 7:30. He always ordered the same thing and always left a generous tip. He was polite but quiet, never saying more than necessary. Lisa found herself looking forward to his visits. Though she wasn't sure why, one morning Lisa was having a particularly bad day. She had burned her hand on the coffee pot and dropped a plate of eggs. She was trying not to cry when Jake came in for his usual breakfast. "Rough morning?" he asked quietly as she poured his coffee. Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. "Some days are like that," Jake said, "but they pass. Tomorrow will be better." It was a simple thing to say, but something about the way he said it made Lisa believe him. Jake wasn't just being polite. He was someone who understood that life could be hard, but that you could get through it. After 2 weeks in Cedar Ridge, Lisa realized that she hadn't thought about Robert or her old life for an entire day. She was too busy learning her new job and getting to know the people in town. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, but they didn't pry into her personal business. Millie became like a surrogate mother to Lisa. She taught her how to cook simple meals and shared stories about the town's history. In the evenings, they would sit on the back porch of the diner, drinking tea and watching the sunset behind the mountains. "You're looking better," Millie observed one evening. "When you first got here, you looked like someone had broken your spirit. Now you're starting to look like yourself again." Lisa realized that Millie was right. She was sleeping better and had more energy. Her appetite had returned and she was actually enjoying her work. The simple routine of the diner was healing something inside her that had been broken for a long time. Most importantly, Lisa was beginning to remember who she was before she became Robert's wife. She was someone who cared about other people, someone who found joy in small moments, someone who was stronger than she had given herself credit for. The mountains that surrounded Cedar Ridge no longer felt like walls keeping her trapped. They felt like protection, holding her safe while she figured out who she wanted to become. And every morning when Jake came in for coffee, Lisa felt a little spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Spring arrived in Cedar Ridge with a burst of wildflowers and warm sunshine. Lisa had been working at Millie's diner for 6 weeks, and the rhythm of small-town life was becoming natural to her. She knew most of the regular customers by name, and had learned to anticipate their orders before they asked. Jake still came in every morning at 7:30, but now their conversations lasted a little longer. He would ask about her day or comment on the weather. Lisa began to notice small details about him, the way he always hung his hat on the same hook by the door, how he read different books about farming and animals, and the gentle way he spoke. To everyone, one busy Saturday morning, the diner was packed with ranchers who had come to town for supplies. Lisa was rushing between tables, taking orders and refilling coffee cups. She was carrying a tray of plates when she tripped over a customer's bag and went down hard, sending food flying everywhere. The diner went silent as Lisa sat on the floor, surrounded by broken dishes and scrambled eggs. Her knee was scraped and bleeding, and she felt completely humiliated. In her old life, she would have run away and hidden from the embarrassment, but before she could even start to get up, Jake was kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice full of genuine concern. "Just my pride," Lisa said, trying to smile through her embarrassment. Jake helped her to her feet while other customers started cleaning up the mess without being asked. "Happens to the best of us," Jake said calmly. "I once fell off my horse in front of half the town during a parade. Took me months to live that down." His easy manner and the fact that he shared his own embarrassing story made Lisa feel better immediately. Millie brought her a first aid kit, and Jake gently cleaned the scrape on her knee while she sat on a chair in the kitchen. "You know," Jake said as he bandaged her knee, "in ranching we have a saying. You're not a real cowboy until you've been thrown from your horse at least 10 times. Same goes for waitressing, I guess. You're not a real waitress until you've dumped at least one tray of food," Lisa laughed despite herself. "So now I'm officially a real waitress?" "You've been a real waitress since your first day," Jake said, looking up at her with serious eyes. "Takes courage to start over in a new place." "Not everyone can do it." Something in his voice made Lisa curious. "Sounds like you speak from experience." Jake finished with the bandage and stood up. "I came here 5 years ago from Texas, had a ranch down there with my ex-wife. When we divorced, she got the ranch, and I got a broken heart and a pickup truck. Came up here to work for the Morrison family and start over." Lisa was surprised. Jake seemed so settled and content that she had assumed he had lived in Cedar Ridge his whole life. "Do you miss Texas?" "Sometimes I miss the ranch," Jake said thoughtfully, "but not the life I had there. Funny how you can think you want one thing for years and then discover it wasn't right for you at all." Over the following weeks, Jake began staying longer after his breakfast, especially on slower mornings when Lisa had time to talk. He told her about his work on the Morrison Ranch, caring for cattle and maintaining fences and buildings. Lisa found herself fascinated by his stories about life on the ranch. "It's honest work," Jake explained one morning as they sat at the counter during a quiet period. "The animals depend on you completely. If you don't take care of them, they suffer. If you do take care of them, they thrive. It's simple and straightforward. No office politics or backstabbing, just you, the animals, and the land." Lisa thought about her old life, where everything had been complicated and full of unspoken rules about status and appearances. "That sounds peaceful." "It is," Jake agreed. "When I first got here, I was angry and bitter about how my life had turned out. But working with animals and being outdoors every day helped me heal. There's something about taking care of living things that reminds you what's really important." Lisa understood exactly what he meant. Working at the diner, taking care of customers, and being part of a community was healing her in ways she hadn't expected. "I never thought I'd enjoy this kind of work," she admitted. "In my old life, I would have looked down on a job like this." "What changed your mind?" Jake asked. Lisa thought about it. "I guess I realized that there's dignity in any honest work. And there's something satisfying about making people's day a little brighter with good food and friendly service." Jake nodded approvingly. "My grandfather used to say that a person's worth isn't measured by how much money they make or what kind of car they drive. It's measured by how they treat people and whether they leave the world a little better than they found it. These conversations with Jake became the highlight of Lisa's days. He had a way of looking at life that was both simple and profound. He talked about respecting the land, caring for animals, and the importance of community. His values were so different from the materialistic world she had come from. One afternoon, Jake surprised Lisa by showing up at the diner during her break. "Want to see where I work?" he asked. "It's a beautiful day for a drive." Lisa looked at Millie, who shooed her toward the door. "Go on," Millie said. "You've been working too hard. You need some fresh air." Jake's pickup truck was old but well-maintained, like everything else about him. As they drove out of town toward the Morrison Ranch, Lisa rolled down her window and breathed in the clean mountain air. She had been in Cedar Ridge for 2 months but had never left the Main Street area. The Morrison Ranch spread across a wide valley surrounded by mountains. Cattle grazed in green pastures, and a clear stream ran through the property. The ranch house was a large log building with a wide porch, and there were several barns and outbuildings scattered around the property. "It's beautiful," Lisa said as they parked near one of the barns. "Wait until you see the sunset from up here," Jake said. "Some evenings, the whole sky turns pink and orange. Makes you understand why people fight to protect places like this." Jake showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the horses and explaining how the operation worked. He clearly loved his job and took pride in the work he did. When he talked about the animals, his voice was gentle and caring. They ended up sitting on a fence, watching the cattle graze in the evening light. The mountains around them were turning purple in the fading sunlight, and the air was filled with the sound of birds and the gentle lowing of cattle. "This is what peace feels like," Lisa said, more to herself than to Jake. "Took me a while to find it," Jake said. "Back in Texas, I was always chasing something: more land, more cattle, more money. I thought success meant getting bigger and bigger, but after my divorce, I realized that sometimes less is more." Lisa understood. In her marriage to Robert, she had always been focused on the next goal: the bigger house, the fancier car, the more prestigious social circle. She had never stopped to ask if those things actually made her happy. "Do you think people can really change?" Lisa asked. "Or do we just keep making the same mistakes over and over?" Jake was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. "I think people can change if they want to badly enough, but it takes courage to let go of who you used to be and become who you're meant to be." As they drove back to town in the gathering darkness, Lisa felt something shifting inside her. For the first time since her divorce, she was beginning to imagine a future that didn't involve getting back what she had lost. Instead, she was starting to envision building something entirely new when Jake walked her to the door of the diner. He paused on the sidewalk. "Thanks for coming out to the ranch today," he said. "It was nice to share it with someone who appreciates it." "Thank you for showing me," Lisa replied. "I haven't felt this relaxed in years." As Jake drove away, Lisa stood on the sidewalk looking up at the stars. They were brighter here than they had ever been in the city, with no light pollution to dim their shine. She thought about Jake's grandfather's words, about leaving the world a little better than you found it. For the first time in months, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She wasn't just hiding from her old life anymore. She was building a new one, brick by brick, day by day. And maybe, just maybe, she was falling in love with a cowboy who understood that true wealth had nothing to do with money. Lisa had been living in Cedar Ridge for 3 months when her peaceful new life was shattered by a familiar voice. She was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when she heard someone behind her say, "Well, this is quite a step down from our old life." She turned around and felt her stomach drop. Robert stood in the doorway of Millie's diner, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit and polished shoes. He was thinner than she remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes, but his arrogant expression was exactly the same. "Hello, Lisa," Robert said, walking toward her like he owned the place. "Took me a while to track you down. I had to hire a private investigator to find you in this nowhere town." Lisa's hands were shaking as she set down the cloth she had been using to clean tables. "What are you doing here, Robert?" "I came to bring." "You home?" Robert said, looking around the diner with obvious disgust. "This little phase of yours has gone on long enough. It's time to come back to reality." Millie appeared from the kitchen, drawn by the tension in Lisa's voice. She took one look at Robert and positioned herself protectively near Lisa. "Is everything okay here?" "This is Robert," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ex-husband." Millie's expression immediately became guarded. She had heard enough of Lisa's story to know that this man had caused her a lot of pain. "Sir, if you're here to cause trouble, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to rescue my wife from whatever breakdown led her to this place." "Ex-wife," Lisa corrected, finding her voice. "We're divorced, remember?" "You made sure of that." "That was a mistake," Robert said, moving closer to Lisa. "I've come to apologize and ask you to come home." "We can work things out?" Lisa stared at him in disbelief. "You left me for another woman. You hid money from me during the divorce. You destroyed our marriage and my life. And now you want to work things out?" Robert had the grace to look uncomfortable for a moment. "Things with Kelly didn't work out the way I expected. She turned out to be different than I thought." "Different how?" Lisa asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Robert's jaw tightened. "She was using me. After we moved in together, she maxed out my credit cards and started seeing my business partner behind my back. When I found out, she and Tom had already cleaned out my business accounts and were planning to start their own company." Lisa felt a cold satisfaction at this news, followed immediately by guilt for feeling that way. "So Kelly left you the same way you left me." "It's not the same thing at all," Robert snapped. "You and I had a real marriage. We built something together. Kelly was just a gold digger who saw an opportunity." "And what does that make me?" Lisa asked. "Someone you could come back to when your real choice didn't work out?" Robert ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Lisa remembered from their marriage. "Look, I know I made mistakes, but we can start over. I've learned from this experience. I know what's really important now." "Which is what?" Lisa asked. "Security, stability, someone I can trust." Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black box. "I bought you a new ring. Bigger than your old one. We can have a fresh start." Lisa looked at the ring box like it was a snake about to bite her. "You think you can just show up here with an expensive ring and erase what you did to me?" "I think I can offer you a real life again," Robert said, his voice becoming harder. "Look around, Lisa. You're waiting tables in a dump in the middle of nowhere. You live in a tiny apartment above a diner. This isn't the life you're meant to have." The words stung because they echoed Lisa's own fears. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if she was just hiding from the real world instead of facing her problems. But hearing Robert say it made her angry instead of ashamed. "This is my life," Lisa said firmly. "I chose it, and I'm proud of it." Robert laughed again, and this time it was cruel. "Come on, Lisa, be honest. You're playing dress-up, pretending to be someone you're not. You're educated and intelligent. You're meant for better things than this." "Better according to who?" Lisa shot back. "You? The man who threw away 8 years of marriage for a woman who robbed you blind." Robert's face darkened. "At least I took a chance on something real instead of hiding in some fantasy small-town life." "There's nothing fantasy about this," Lisa said, her voice rising. "I work hard every day. I contribute to this community. I have friends who care about me." "Friends?" Robert looked around the empty diner dismissively. "You mean these locals, who probably never finished high school?" "Come on, Lisa. You don't belong here any more than I do." That's when Jake walked through the door for his afternoon coffee. He took in the scene immediately, Lisa's flushed face, Robert's aggressive posture, and Millie's protective stance. His expression became alert and cautious. "Everything okay here?" Jake asked, directing the question to Lisa. Robert turned to. "Look at Jake, taking in his work clothes and cowboy boots." "And who might you be?" "Jake Harrison," Jake said simply, not offering his hand. "Ah," Robert said with a smirk. The local entertainment? Let me guess, you're Lisa's rebound guy? The simple cowboy who swept her off her feet with his rustic charm. Lisa felt her face burning with embarrassment and anger. Robert, stop it. But Robert was just getting started. It's actually kind of sweet in a pathetic way. Lisa always did have a romantic streak. I bet you told her all about your honest work and simple values, didn't you, cowboy? Jake's expression didn't change, but Lisa could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. I think you should leave, he said quietly. I don't think so, Robert replied. I'm talking to my wife. Ex-wife. Lisa and Jake said at the same time. Robert's eyes narrowed as he looked between them. How touching. You've already got her trained to defend you. But here's the thing, cowboy, I'm offering Lisa her real life back. A house in the suburbs, financial security, a future with possibilities. What can you offer her? A trailer and a pickup truck? I can offer her respect, Jake said, his voice still calm but with an edge to it. Something you obviously never learned how to give. Robert stepped closer to Jake, and Lisa was afraid they might actually fight. Respect doesn't pay the bills, friend. Respect doesn't give her the life she deserves. And what life does she deserve? Jake asked. One where she's treated like a trophy instead of a partner? One where she gives up her dreams to support yours? One where she's abandoned when something shinier comes along? Robert's face turned red. You don't know anything about our marriage? I know enough, Jake said. I know she's stronger and braver than you ever gave her credit for. I know she's built a good life here through her own hard work. And I know she deserves better than someone who only wants her back because his other option didn't work out. Lisa felt tears starting to form, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude that someone finally understood her worth and was willing to defend it. Robert looked back and forth between Lisa and Jake, and she could see him finally understanding that this wasn't just a phase she was going through. She had really moved on and built a new life without him. Fine, Robert said, his voice turning cold and cruel. Have your little fantasy romance with the hired hand? But when reality sets in and you realize what you've given up, don't come crawling back to me. This offer won't be on the table forever. He threw the ring box on the nearest table and headed for the door, but before leaving he turned back one more time. You used to be somebody, Lisa. Now you're just another small-town nobody serving coffee to truckers. I hope your cowboy is worth throwing your life away for. The door slammed behind him, leaving the diner in stunned silence. Lisa stood frozen, feeling like she had been hit by a tornado. Part of her wanted to run after Robert and tell him he was right. Part of her wanted to disappear into the mountains and never come back, but then she felt Jake's gentle hand on her shoulder, and Millie moved to stand beside her, and she realized that Robert was wrong about one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. She had people who cared about her for who she really was, not for who they wanted her to be. Still, Robert's words had opened old wounds and planted new doubts. As she looked around the simple diner that had become her refuge, Lisa couldn't help wondering if she really was just hiding from her real life instead of living it. The next morning, Lisa woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Robert's words kept echoing in her head. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was just hiding from reality in this small town. Maybe she was fooling herself about finding happiness. Here, she dressed slowly and went downstairs to open the diner. Usually she loved the quiet morning routine of starting the coffee and preparing for the day. But today, everything felt different. She kept thinking about the life she had given up and wondering if she was making a huge mistake. When Jake came in at his usual time, Lisa could barely look at him. She poured his coffee without saying good morning and took his order with her. Eyes down, she was embarrassed about what Robert had said and worried that Jake might think less of her now. You okay? Jake asked quietly as she set his plate down. Fine, Lisa said quickly, but she wasn't fine at all. The morning passed slowly. Lisa made several mistakes, gave customers the wrong orders, spilled coffee, forgot to bring someone their check. Her mind was somewhere else, replaying the scene with Robert over and over. Around 10 o'clock, the diner door opened and Lisa's heart sank. Robert walked in again, looking more confident than he had the day before. He was carrying a large manila envelope and had a smug expression on his face. "Good morning, Lisa," he said, sliding into a booth like he belonged there. "I hope you've had time to think about our conversation yesterday." Lisa reluctantly approached his table. "What do you want now, Robert?" Robert opened the envelope and spread several papers across the table. "I want to show you what you're giving up by staying here." The papers were financial documents, bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. "This is what I've rebuilt since the Kelly situation," Robert explained. "I learned from my mistakes and made some smart investments. I'm worth more now than I ever was during our marriage." Lisa looked at the numbers on the papers. There were a lot of zeros. More money than she had ever imagined having. "I bought a new house," Robert continued, pulling out photographs. 6 bedrooms, swimming pool, 3-car garage. It's in the best neighborhood in the city. We could start a family there, Lisa, have the children you always wanted." The mention of children hit Lisa like a physical blow. It had been her biggest dream during their marriage, and Robert had always found reasons to delay. Now he was using that dream against her. "You said we should wait," Lisa whispered. "You always said it wasn't the right time." "I was wrong," Robert said smoothly. "I was focused on building my career. But now I understand what's really important. We could have 2, maybe 3 kids. You could quit working and focus on being a mother." Lisa stared at the photos of the beautiful house and felt her resolve wavering. Children, a family, financial security. Everything she had dreamed of during her marriage was being offered to her on a silver platter. "I've even looked into private schools," Robert continued. "The best education money can buy. Our children would have every advantage in life." Other customers in the diner were starting to notice the conversation. Lisa was aware of people looking at them and whispering. She felt exposed and confused. "Think about it, Lisa," Robert said, his voice becoming more persuasive. "What kind of life can that cowboy give you? He's a ranch hand. He'll never own his own place. He'll never be able to provide for a family the way you deserve." Just then, Jake walked back into the diner. He had forgotten his book and came back to get it. But when he saw Robert there again, his expression darkened. Robert noticed Jake and smiled coldly. "Perfect timing," he said, loud enough for everyone in the diner to hear. "I was just explaining to Lisa what I can offer her versus what you can offer her." Jake walked over to the table, his movements calm and deliberate. "And what exactly can you offer her?" Robert gestured to the papers spread across the table. "Financial security. A real home. The chance to have children and give them the best of everything. A future with unlimited possibilities." "And what makes you think those things matter to her?" Jake asked. Robert laughed. "Because she's not stupid. Any woman would choose security over uncertainty, comfort over struggle, success over failure." The diner had gone completely quiet. Everyone was watching the confrontation between Robert in his expensive suit and Jake in his work clothes. Lisa stood frozen between them, feeling like she was being pulled apart. "You know what I think?" Jake said, his voice still calm but carrying a strength that made everyone listen. "I think you're the one who's stupid." Robert's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Jake looked directly at Robert, and his next words rang through the silent diner like a bell. "You had pure gold in this woman, and you threw it away for fool's gold. That makes you the poorest man I've ever met." Lisa felt her breath catch. The simple power of Jake's words cut through all of Robert's fancy offers and expensive promises, but Jake wasn't finished. He turned to look at Lisa, and his voice became gentle but firm. "This woman is worth more than any house or bank account. Or investment portfolio. She's got a heart that shines brighter than all the diamonds in the world. She's got courage that runs deeper than any oil well. She's got a spirit that's stronger than any storm." The diner was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was hanging on Jake's every word. "You were too blind to see what you had," Jake continued, looking back at Robert. "You treated her like she was just another possession, something to show off at parties and then ignore when you got bored. You made her feel like she wasn't good enough just as she was." Robert tried to interrupt, but Jake held up his hand. "But here's what you never understood. Jake said, his voice rising slightly. Lisa doesn't need you to give her value. She doesn't need your money or your house or your promises to be worth something. She's been worth everything from the day she was born. Lisa felt tears running down her cheeks, but for the first time in days, they were good tears. Jake stepped closer to Robert's table. You want to know what I can offer her? I can offer her respect. Every single day. I can offer her honesty, complete and total. I can offer her love that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. And what about security? Robert demanded. What about providing for her? Jake smiled, and it was the first time Lisa had seen him look anything close to angry. Security isn't about how much money you have in the bank. Security is about knowing that the person you love will stand by you no matter what happens. Security is about building something real together, not just collecting expensive things. He gestured around the simple diner. This place might not look like much to you, but Lisa has found more happiness here in 3 months than she had in 8 years of marriage to you. She's discovered who she really is when she's not trying to be what someone else wants her to. Robert was getting angry now. This is all very romantic, Cowboy, but romance doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't put food on the table. You're right, Jake said. Love doesn't pay the bills, but honest work does. Treating people with respect does. Building real relationships in a community does. Lisa has all of those things here. Jake turned to face the entire diner, and his voice carried to every corner. This woman came here broken and scared, and she's rebuilt herself from the ground up. She's worked harder than anyone I know. She's earned the respect of everyone in this town. She's created a life here that's based on who she really is, not on what she owns. He looked back at Robert. You say you can give her everything, but you already had the chance to give her everything and you threw it away. You chose someone else over her. You made her feel worthless. And now you want her back, not because you love her, but because your other choice didn't work out. The silence in the diner was deafening. Robert looked around at all the faces staring at him and realized that he had lost this battle completely. Jake's final words were spoken directly to Robert, but they were meant for Lisa. You had gold, mister, and you traded it for dirt. But gold doesn't lose its value just because someone's too foolish to recognize it. Robert gathered up his papers with shaking hands. His face was red with embarrassment and anger. This isn't over, he said to Lisa. When you come to your senses, you'll realize what you're giving up. But as he headed for the door, Jake called after him. It is over, has been since the day you walked out on her. The only difference is now everyone knows what kind of man you really are. After Robert left, the diner slowly came back to life. Customers returned to their conversations, but Lisa could tell that everyone had been moved by what they had witnessed. Several people came up to her and Jake to offer their support. Millie appeared with a pot of coffee and refilled everyone's cups. Well, she said with a smile, I'd say that settles that. Lisa looked at Jake, who was suddenly looking shy and embarrassed about his public speech. She realized that this quiet, humble cowboy had just defended her honor in front of the entire town. He had seen her value when she couldn't see it herself. For the first time since Robert had appeared, Lisa knew exactly where she belonged. 1 year later, Lisa stood in front of the small mirror in her bedroom above the diner, adjusting the simple white dress she had chosen for her wedding day. It wasn't the elaborate designer gown she had worn for her first wedding, but it was perfect for who she had become. The dress had belonged to Millie's daughter, who had worn it 30 years ago when she married her high school sweetheart. The fabric was soft cotton with delicate lace at the collar and sleeves. When Millie had offered it to Lisa, tears had filled both their eyes. Every bride needs something borrowed, Millie had said, carefully taking the dress from its protective garment bag. My daughter would be honored to have you wear this. Lisa looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. The woman looking back at her was so different from the one who had arrived in Cedar Ridge a year ago. Her hair was simpler now, pulled back in a loose bun with small wildflowers that Jake had picked for her that morning. Her face was tanned from working outdoors, and there were laugh lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But the biggest change was in her eyes. They were peaceful now, filled with a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Millie entered carrying a small bouquet of mountain wildflowers. "From Jake," she said with a knowing smile. "He's been up since dawn picking these for you." Lisa took the bouquet and breathed in the sweet scent of the flowers. They were simple blooms, daisies, lupins, and Indian paintbrush, but they were more beautiful to her than the elaborate rose arrangements from her first wedding. "How is he?" Lisa asked. "Nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs," Millie laughed, "but happy." "Happiest I've ever seen that boy," Lisa smiled. She had never seen Jake nervous about anything. He faced angry bulls and dangerous weather with calm confidence, but the thought of marrying her had him pacing the back porch of the church all morning. "And how are you?" Millie asked, studying Lisa's face carefully. "Perfect," Lisa said, and she meant it. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The wedding was being held at the small white church on the edge of town. It was the same church where Jake's parents had been married 40 years ago, and where most of the town's couples had exchanged vows for generations. Lisa had fallen in love with its simple beauty the first time Jake had shown it to her. As Lisa and Millie walked the 3 blocks from the diner to the church, townspeople came out of their houses and shops to wish her well. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop pressed a small white rose into her hand. Tom from the gas station tipped his hat and told her she looked beautiful. Children ran alongside them, giggling and throwing flower petals in the air. This was so different from her first wedding, which had been held at an expensive hotel with 300 guests, most of whom she barely knew. That wedding had been about status and appearances. This wedding was about love and community. When they reached the church, Lisa could see through the open doors that it was packed with people. The entire town had come to celebrate with them. Jake had no family left. His parents had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and Lisa's family lived too far away to attend, but it didn't matter. The people of Cedar Ridge had become their family. Pastor Williams met them at the church steps. He was a kind man in his 70s who had baptized Jake as a baby and had watched him grow up. "Ready, my dear?" he asked Lisa. Lisa took a deep breath and nodded. "More than ready." The church door opened and the wedding march began to play. On the old piano, Lisa walked down the aisle alone by choice. She didn't need anyone to give her away because she was giving herself freely to the man she loved. Jake stood at the altar wearing his best suit, the same one he wore to church every Sunday, but with a new shirt and tie. When he saw Lisa walking toward him, his face lit up with such joy that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. As Lisa reached the altar, Jake took her hands in his. They were work-roughened hands, calloused from years of honest labor, but they were gentle and warm. These hands had helped her up when she fell in the diner. These hands had bandaged her scraped knee with such care. These hands had held her when she cried about her fears and doubts. Pastor Williams began the ceremony with words about love being patient and kind, about 2 people choosing to build a life together based on respect and commitment. Lisa barely heard the words because she was lost in Jake's eyes, seeing her future reflected there. When it came time for vows, Jake spoke first. His voice was quiet but clear, carrying to every corner of the small church. "Lisa," he said, "a year ago you came to our town like a lost soul looking for shelter. But what I found was gold that had been buried under years of someone else's expectations. You taught me that real treasure isn't something you find in the ground or in a bank account. It's something you recognize in another person's heart." He paused, emotion making his voice thick. "I promise to see your worth every single day. I promise to support your dreams, even when they're different from mine. I promise to love you not for who I want you to be, but for who you already are." There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Jake finished his vows. Lisa felt tears of joy running down her cheeks as she began her own promises. "Jake," she said, "you saved my life without even knowing it. You showed me that love isn't about what someone can give you or what you can do for them. Love is about seeing the best in each other and choosing to build something beautiful together. She squeezed his hands tighter. I promise to work beside you, not behind you. I promise to be your partner in everything we face. I promise to love you with the same honesty and integrity that you've shown me every day since we met. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Jake kissed Lisa with such tenderness that the entire congregation burst into applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, Lisa felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was held in the church social hall, decorated with more wildflowers and quilts made by the church ladies. There was no elaborate catering or expensive champagne. Instead, everyone had brought a dish to share, and the tables were loaded with homemade food that tasted better than any fancy wedding meal. Jake's boss, Tom Morrison, stood up to make a toast. I've known Jake for 5 years, he said, and I've never seen him happier than he's been since Lisa came to town. They're proof that sometimes the best things in life come to those who are brave enough to start over. As the evening went on, Lisa danced with Jake to music played by local musicians. She was spun around the dance floor by half the men in town, each one welcoming her officially into their community. The children ran around between the tables, and the older folks told stories and laughed until their sides hurt. Near midnight, Jake and Lisa finally slipped away from the celebration. They drove out to the Morrison Ranch where Tom had given them permission to build a small house on a piece of land overlooking the valley. For their wedding night, Jake